Human behavior to me is fascinating. From a condescending point of view, of course. Really? That sweater and that jeans? Okay. Admittedly not as fun as trying to solve the mysteries of the universe, but it's up there. And often, when I browse the forest of a library that is the internet, I come across terms and facts about human behavior that I think is neither healthy nor right. Things like going with the flow, doing as you're told without question, and blaming others for your mistakes is stuff I don't think that humans should be doing. So, hopefully by acknowledging the existence of these cognitive biases, as they are called, we can rebel against our own bad behavior, or something along those lines. So here are 5 cognitive biases that we as a species should stop doing. Okay, so there are 2 things that I want to mention before this video goes on. And the first one is that this list only includes human behavior and human thoughts, not human emotions that we can't control. Take, for example, hormones. We are all taught at a very young age that during puberty our hormones increase in our blood, so we start behaving in a more emotional way. And we can't do anything about that behavior because, well, our behavior is then dominated by our hormones. There's nothing you can do. That sort of thing will not be on this list. However, take another example. When humans are told by an authorial figure to do bad stuff, we usually do that bad stuff because, while we know what we're doing isn't right, we justify our behavior by blaming it on someone else. I only did it because he or she told me to. You know, that whole ordeal. Now that is more what this list is going for. Stuff that we can prevent simply by knowing that it's expected of us to do those things in those situations. The second thing I wanted to mention is that I don't blame you for any of these things if you've been doing them before. These are completely ordinary and normal and understandable things to do in a given situation, and if you've been doing them, that's justified by you simply being human. And on that note, we might as well start off the list there with the last example. It's called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a type of paradox in your own head between opinion and behavior. For example, a smoker might think that smoking is bad for him and he should really quit it, yet he still smokes. His behavior goes against his opinion, or his opinion goes against his behavior, and he is experiencing cognitive dissonance. And humans, we don't like this cognitive dissonance, this paradox in our own head, so we find a way to get around it. Usually, an emphasis on usually, by justifying our behavior with an excuse. We can also get around it by changing our opinions or changing our behavior, but those aren't really relevant right now. Examples of that can be, well, it was okay for me to break my diet this once because I've never eaten pie in my entire life. Or maybe, well, I have to take illegal drugs in order to win the race because everybody else does so. Or maybe even, well, it's okay for me to kill all the Jews in Europe, or in the world for that sake, because Hitler told me it was fine. Don't do that. Don't kill all the Jews in Europe, or the world for that sake. Please don't do that. I want you to keep in mind how you justify your own behavior. Just because everybody else said it's fine does not mean it's fine. Just because a person of authority said it's fine does not mean it's fine. I sound like a parent. Moving on. Have you ever experienced that once you started a new project or started a new hobby, you felt really confident, it wasn't that difficult, but then you did a little bit more research into what it actually takes in order to be good at that subject or good at that hobby, and you found out that, wow, there's a lot more to this than I first thought. I actually suck. Well, my friend, and you have been a victim of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Dunning-Kruger, let's just say Dunning-Kruger. The Dunning-Kruger effect has to do with the correlation between confidence and competence. It states that a person that knows very little about a subject, thus have a low competence, will think they know much more about the subject than they actually do, thus have a high confidence. On the other hand, people who have a high experience or high competence in something tend to underestimate their own experience, and while they don't have necessarily low confidence, they don't have as high confidence as they should have on the level that they are at in their competence. The Dunning-Kruger effect can be summed up using a single graph. So we have competence on the x-axis and confidence on the y-axis. Now, I don't know if there are any statisticians in the comment section, but I mean, there's definitely something going on here. Look at the confidence boost at the beginning, only for it to decrease after we find out how much we don't know. Then, as we learn the stuff we didn't know before, our confidence increases. Not as much as it was in the beginning, but it still increases. I guess the only way to really escape the Dunning-Kruger effect is by acknowledging its existence and trying to not get too cocky at the beginning of learning a new skill. Just keep in mind that once you try and learn something new, there might be a little bit more to it than you first think. Moving on. Have you ever walked down the street and found a drunk person laying on the sidewalk and you wanted to help him, but you thought, nah, I don't really have the time, it's not really my responsibility, somebody else should do it? Well, then you have been a victim of the bystander effect, and I really hope you have never been in that sort of situation. That sounds really scary. The bystander effect is that most people will avoid doing something that they think is right, that requires effort, if they think that the responsibility is not on them, or if the responsibility is on someone else, typically in the sort of scenario that I just described to you. Now, luckily, there is a type of solution to the bystander effect. Studies have shown that if only one person in a crowd of people who are affected by the bystander effect does what the group doesn't want to do, more people in that group is going to follow them. Sort of like, shouldn't we all do something about this clear and obvious problem? Oh look, somebody's doing something about it, now I can help too. Here, let me help you, brother. Well, it doesn't have to be a life or death situation. I encounter the bystander effect on almost a daily basis. Often in class, our teacher tells us to discuss something in groups, as they do, and when they say that, we never speak until somebody else has spoken. So I have therefore decided that I am going to be the person to speak up in class or to start discussing in our groups, because if I don't do it, nobody else will. And it's just going to be a awkward silence, and I hate awkward silences. And that's really the lesson to be learned about the bystander effect, don't you think? All it takes is one person to turn the crowd around. Turn the crowd around, that's difficult to say. All it takes is one person, so be that person. Be the, I don't know, be the spark to ignite the fire, or whatever. Anyways, moving on. Have you ever been driving into an intersection when suddenly some idiot cuts you off and almost kills both of you? What an idiot, you think? He must be a bad person for driving on red lights. But if you think that, you have fallen victim for the fundamental attribution error. First take. When people behave in a bad way, or make a mistake, or do something stupid, we have two ways of describing or explaining that behavior. We can either blame the individual, say that something is wrong with the person who did the mistake. They arrived late for work just because they wanted to annoy you. They cut you off in traffic because they are a person who cuts people off in traffic and they don't care about other people's feelings. Or they they stole your food because they are a person who steals. They are just a bad individual, a rotten egg. Or, alternatively, we can excuse their behavior by saying that the situation called for it, or the situation they were in right then forced them to behave in the way they did. For example, they didn't cut you off in traffic because they like cutting off people in traffic, or because they are a bad person, but because they had to, say, rush to the hospital. Or they arrived late for work not because they are a person who sleeps in, but because the alarm clock didn't go off. Or they didn't steal your food because they wanted to be mean to you, but because they were starving, and if they didn't get any food soon, they would die. The thing is that people tend to blame the individual for the behavior, or the bad behavior, rather than the situation. And this is most often wrong. People just do bad stuff, not necessarily because they are bad people, but because the situation calls for it. That is most frequently what happens. So if you ever catch yourself blaming someone on themselves for their mistakes, try to come up with a situation or a logical reason for why they did what they did. Anyways, moving on. We flock by performers and successful people by the thousands because we want to hear how they made it, how they became successful, how they became famous. But there's a fundamental flaw with this, namely that we only hear how those who made it. We never hear the story of those who didn't make it. This is called survivorship bias. I'm going to further my point here with a metaphor or an example rather than an explanation. So imagine this country in complete dictatorship. Let's take North Korea as an example. The following statistics aren't true, they are made up for the sake of making an example, but let's say that every year 100,000 people try to escape this country, but only doesn't make it out alive. The rest gets shot and dies at the border. And those who make it out alive become celebrities in the rest of the world. How did you make it out? The media asks. And one of the people who made it out says, well, I tried to run over the border, and I succeeded. Now the media asks itself, well, then why doesn't more people try to escape from North Korea if it's that simple? What they fail to see is the 99,988 people who tried to escape but failed. What I want you to take away from this is the fact that if somebody tells you how to do something difficult and they actually achieve that thing by pure luck, then don't listen to them. Don't do as they tell you, because you're probably going to fail. You only hear their side of the story. You never hear the story of those who did the exact same thing, but those who didn't make it because they weren't lucky. So that's it, guys. Remember how you justify your behavior. Try not to be too cocky at the beginning of a new project. Remember that other people do bad stuff because of the situation they're in, usually not because they are bad people. Be brave. Stand out of the crowd if you have to, especially in emergency situations, and think about the evidence you're not presented with. That's not so hard, is it? Don't forget to vote for your favorite element in the monthly element contest down in the comment section. Who knows, maybe your favorite element will be the next element of the month. There's no easy way to break this to you guys, but I just started high school, which is a lot tougher than secondary school. And in addition, it becomes a lot of work when you want to get into a fine university, which I want to. So there's a chance that in the future, near future even, I would have to reduce the number of videos per month from 2 to 1. It's not set in stone yet, but there's a chance that this will have to happen. This must happen in the future. Maybe. I'll try to keep up the schedule as normal for now, but just don't take it as a shock, okay? My lighting just went out again.